This SoonerScoop.com video is streaming in crystal clear 4K resolution on YouTube thanks to Enjoy Vision in Oklahoma City. If you're ready to see the rest of the world just as clearly, get your fresh perspective at Enjoy Vision. Enjoy Vision. This is where Sooner Scoop LASIX.
Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosevich, George Stoia here from the SoonerScoop.com studios on historic Campus Quarter. Good July 1 to you.
I can't believe it's July.
Happy Sam Presti Day.
Shout out.
Happy Canada Day.
Shout out Shea.
I think. And Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. Big contract today.
Yeah,
good news for the Thunder.
$71 million a year.
It's been a pretty good run here for the Oklahoma City Thunder. This is an Oklahoma football program, though. And, George, you just got back from Louisiana. Spent some time with John Mateer. Wanted to get into everything that kind of went down at the Manning Passing Academy over the weekend. You wrote a couple stories about it already up on SoonerScoop.com. He had a help in getting Bo Bentley to commit to Oklahoma. But before we get to everything with Mr. Mateer, let us tell you about our good friends over at Rhoback, RHOBACK.com. The Rhoback Everyday Shorts, the Delta Performance Pants, the Looper Shorts. You can have all of that by going to Rhoback.com, promo code Sooner20 for 20% off your order. And with the summer, I guess here now, we can say that, right? Here on the week of the 4th of July, you're going to be needing some Rhoback, plenty of patriotic gear to go through the 4th weekend, which is, as we covered yesterday with Josh McQuistion, one of our favorites around here.
Yeah, I think I'll be wearing some Rhoback out at Grand Lake this weekend, so I'm excited about that.
Very good, very good. Don't drown. That would put a damper on the wedding.
I won't be doing that.
It also pissed me off because I'm missing this golf tournament for the wedding as well.
Keep telling me that.
Well, you don't
have to come to the wedding.
I'm going to be at the wedding. Thank you to Rhoback.com. Promo code Sooner20 for 20% off. Let's get into it. John Mateer went down to Thibodaux, Louisiana over the weekend. The Manning Passing Academy at Nicholls State University. Basically a who's who of college quarterbacks.
Yeah, this is an event that if you're unfamiliar with it out there, this is the top college quarterbacks that are invited to this. I think there was around 40, maybe a little over 40 guys down there this weekend. And John Mateer, for him, I think it was a really unique experience. I mean, one of the first things he said to me was like, this is just super special to just be invited. It's funny for him to say that because it feels like the off season that he's had, he's one of the most talked about guys in the country. And so for him to be like, oh, this is incredible to be, here with guys like Arch Manning, Lenore Sellers, Garrett Nussmeier, you name it. Darian Mensah was his roommate, along with Stephen Jelly from Syracuse. So, I think for him, it was cool to be invited to that. Cause like he even told me, Eddie, he wasn't somebody that, was even invited to like Elite 11 events,
sure,
years ago when he was getting, recruited out of high school. Cause he wasn't getting recruited really out of high school. And, a lot of this stuff, that we'll get into will be in written form. I'm doing some big stories on John over the next month before before fall camp gets going and before the season. So make sure to subscribe to Sooner Scoop because, I got to spend, Eddie, I think about an hour with him, and a good chunk of that, 45 minutes to 50 minutes, was one-on-one, and got into some really good stuff. So it was really cool going down there. It was a heck of a drive, about 11 hours to get down to Thibodaux, Louisiana, which is, let me tell you, that is out in the swamps, middle of nowhere, Louisiana. But it was really fun getting to catch up with him, and he was fantastic to talk to.
All of our SEC brethren down there in Louisiana. I know that
lots of Arch Manning. I mean, the Texas media contingent was there.
Sure.
Getting to talk to Arch and obviously Peyton and Eli speak down there. Cooper is available as well. Obviously Arch's dad, and then with Baton Rouge being right down the street. There was a lot of LSU media down there, too, talking to Garrett Nussmeier.
I can't remember exactly what it was, but I think they put out like a Raising Cane's commercial with the Mannings. I think Archie's in it, and then Doug Nussmeier, Garrett's father, who obviously coaches college football and NFL football as well. The EA top quarterbacks, the ratings are starting to come out. We're at that time of the year, folks. John Mateer, number 6 overall. Cade Klubnik, number 1. I guess there's 3 guys with a 92% grade. Cade Klubnik, Garrett Nussmeier, Drew Aller from Penn State, Sam Levitt, 91, Lenore Seller at 91, as well as John Mateer and Carson Beck at 91. So I guess technically the second highest rating you could talk about when you're talking about these quarterbacks coming into next year.
And all those guys were down there, except for I think Carson Beck was not down there, and he was there a year ago. Jackson Arnold was there last year. So, I think it's a really cool thing that John gets to go down there, and he spoke a lot about getting to pick the minds of some of those guys, as well as, guys like Peyton Manning. John Gruden was down there helping out kind of in an advisory role.
We got to get John Gruden on the show to talk about what he thought about John Mateer.
And I guess, they were just kind of shooting the crap down there. And John said the first night he was at dinner with Peyton Manning and John Gruden. And there was, I'm sure several other college quarterbacks, but just those guys talking ball. He's like, I didn't say one word for 2 hours. I was just listening to them, talk about formations and readings and how Peyton, I guess, used to, lead all these walkthroughs without the coaches and stuff like that, which, for John, he said the biggest thing he learned down there was more mental than, anything physical, obviously.
Sure.
Maybe some pointers here and there with footwork, but other than that, it was a lot of just soaking in the knowledge of guys like that.
Which I think is interesting because when you're talking about, John Mateer and what this offense is going to be, as we've discussed here on the program before, he's done a lot at the Division I level, obviously coming in from Washington State. But I think that, just kind of what you relayed back to us and what you've already wrote on Suitor Scoop, just in terms of you are stepping into something that I don't think that he even would have thought was a possibility, even going into maybe the season last year at this time.
Yeah, no, and I think that when he looks at Oklahoma, the opportunity, and he spoke a lot about that, the opportunity to OU to, not only be closer to home. I think that was a huge part of the reason why he wanted to come back to, closer to Little Elm, which is only 2.5 hours away. But the opportunity to play at a school like Oklahoma, I think was really intriguing to him, and have these expectations. Something he said was that he's always been very confident that he was going to be a premier quarterback. And I have this quote here I thought was really enlightening. This is always what I wanted. I always believed it would happen. It's surreal, but it's not the craziest thing ever. The fact that I'm at Oklahoma and how it worked out is crazy, but I knew I would be one of the premier quarterbacks in college football at some point. It just hadn't happened yet. I guess it worked out. And that to me, Eddie, is kind of like he understands the levity of being the quarterback at Oklahoma. He's wanted something like this, and now he gets a chance to go prove it. And where better than to do it at a place like OU, where you have the lineage of Heisman quarterbacks and all the success that they've had offensively, other than last year, in recent years.
Hit me if I'm giving away too much, but it has been talked about. We talked about it when he made the commitment back in January, coming in from Pullman, was the fact that Baker Mayfield's of the world, Cam Ward's of the world, all talked to him, not just about Oklahoma, specifically with Baker, but somebody like a lot of guys that talked about coming in, being able to implement what you do and the opportunity that's there.
Yeah, and I won't give it all away because, again, I want you guys to read the stories on Soonerscoop.com. But there's been several guys that were very good quarterbacks in Oklahoma that have spoken to John Mateer over the last few months. And it started with Baker on his recruitment, which is a great story, and that's been out there. Mm-hmm. But John said that he still talks to Baker every once in a while, which I think is super cool. He did tell me too, Eddie, and I thought this was really interesting, is that he doesn't want to be compared to Baker. And, he has a lot of respect for Baker. He thinks that he was obviously one of the greatest ever at OU and in college football, but he wants to be his own guy. And, talking to him, he does get those comparisons to Baker, and I understand that, especially the way he plays. But his personality is much more like Dylan Gabriel. Very goofy, very laid back, relaxed, joking with you. But I think that it's interesting how many guys he's spoken to that have played the position at Oklahoma and have given him some advice, and how he's kind of soaking that all in to understand, what the expectation is at a place like OU at this position. And, I think he's handling that all the right ways. I mean, you talk to people in the program, whether it's teammates, coaches, trainers, whoever, they all say that his leadership has been one of the biggest difference makers, I think, so far, for this offense and how they've kind of come together.
I think that was one of the things that the current players that were here last year as he came in, and they talked about it during the spring, was, from day one, it seemed like he had a command of the locker room. He was the quarterback on the team, and obviously one of the leaders that's going to have to be a big-time performer this year if Oklahoma wants to meet the goals that they're going to have before the season starts.
Yeah, and one thing he told me that really stood out is that, because I asked him, how have you maybe ingrained yourself so quickly in the program? And he said, well, it's been a huge help that he's already run the offense, and he's done it at a high level. And so coming in, he's not spending time in the film room as much as he is just in the locker room, hanging out with guys, building relationships. He took the offensive lineman out to Broken Bow for a weekend retreat, and just the offensive lineman. And then he's doing extra throwing sessions with the receivers this offseason. Jermichael Carter, he's been working with him since he got on campus from the spring portal. Jaden Ott, another guy that he mentioned. And so he said, he goes, I know the offense. This is my third year playing in this offense. Arbuckle knows what plays I like. He knows what plays I don't like. I understand what's being asked of me in this. And yes, there's certain things that he can do better, I'm sure, in the offense and reads and all of that. But for him, the biggest thing this past spring and over the summer has been becoming that leader, embracing that, and just learning his teammates, because he feels that when it gets into the grind of the season, those are the things that you're going to have to rely on. And I just feel like last year, and obviously you had a quarterback change in the middle of the season that caused some of the issues, but it just didn't feel like they had that. They didn't have that togetherness a lot of times, especially obviously on that side of the ball, and you could sense that. I think that Mateer and his presence, his confidence, you're going to be able to feel that throughout the season, and also just the guys around him believing in him.
I don't think it's as much of a shot at anybody, because everybody saw what the season was a year ago, saw what the offense was, saw what the inability at the quarterback position was. But I think that there's like a growing belief, I guess you could say, that a lot of people within the program feel like if they just have a quarterback that can take care of the football specifically, they can be a pretty damn good football team. Did you get that feeling in talking to John Mateer over the weekend?
I think that was largely some of the pitch from Oklahoma was like, hey, look at what happened last year. If we just had, average.
I'm not saying they would have won 10 games or anything like that, but I mean, obviously the narrative around this program is much different if you're not coming off of a second, 6th, and 7th season in the last 3 years.
Right. And you probably don't get Mateer either, right? If they have better quarterback play last year. So
who knows if Ben Arbuckle's here?
Exactly. So all of it plays into how it, ended up playing out. But I do think the sentiment from Oklahoma and what they told, John Mateer was that, hey, we just need, average to good quarterback play, and we feel like we can win more games. And imagine, though, if we have a great quarterback, and they believe they do in John Mateer, like how good can Oklahoma be? And I think that was intriguing to John, because he knows that he can play at a high level. I think he also knows, Eddie, talking to him, how difficult the SEC is going to be. I mean, he's talked about, he said he's put on some weight this summer, while also getting faster, which is kind of one of those things where it's like, how'd you do that? I think he's up to about 228 pounds, which at quarterback, at that size too, because he's not the tallest guy in the world. He's probably 6'1", but can run. I think that, being durable throughout the season, being able to take off with his legs is going to be something that's really important, and just understanding, the type of defenses he's going to be facing this year versus what he faced last year are going to be a lot more challenging. And he knows that. And I think that that's why he spent this offseason really focusing on some of those things.
You look at the, every metric that is out there on the schedule going into the season. And I think that everybody knows it's extremely tough. Kelly Ford came out with his power rankings for most watchable games, 1 through 10 ranking each week. Oklahoma had 9 games inside the top 10 of the 14-week schedule, which
crazy.
Kind of represents every week it's going to be a little bit of a news story, right? At least it's going to be interesting in 2025. How good does John Mateer think this team can be?
I think he's cautiously optimistic, and I think he's like kind of like a quiet confidence, because he doesn't want to come out and say, hey, we're going to run the league. Like, he gets it. He knows how tough the SEC is going to be. I mean, he went on and on about how good, guys like Garrett Nussmeier, Arch Manning, Lenore Sellers was actually standing
all
right
three
next to him.
guys that are going to be on Oklahoma's schedule in 2025.
Yeah, he's like, look at the guys that I'm going to have to go up against. Like, these are going to be really tough battles. But the thing he said is, he goes, I know that we have the toughest schedule in America, but he goes, we just have to take it one day at a time. He goes, I can't sit here and tell you, about the Texas matchup. He's like, we got to go, beat, who is it, Illinois State first game, and of course you kind of roll your eyes, but, I think that that's the right approach of knowing, hey, there's no weeks off, especially in this league, and you have to go get wins early in the season. I think that Michigan game's obviously going to be huge, but I do think that he feels like they're going to be really good. I mean, he said that, asking about the offense, specifically, he said, kind of quiet. He's like, look, we're going to be pretty good. And that's what he told me. And it's like, it's one of those things where he's like, we're going to show you that we're pretty good. I'm not going to tell you a ton about it right now. We're going to show it to you, but there's some confidence there that they feel like they have a bunch of dudes. I mean, that was a direct quote. Hey, we've got a bunch of dudes on offense. They went out and got some guys in the portal that they feel like are going to be really good players. And I think Mateer's pretty excited about that.
You would hope that some of those dudes are going to be, obviously Jaden Gibson coming back from injury. Yep. You have Giovanni Gibson coming back from injury as well that he sustained in that final week of the spring football experience. And then even somebody like an unknown, like a Jermichael Carter, I know has turned some heads here, early in his career in Norman. Yeah,
he's been working with all those guys. I don't think Giovanni and Jaden are fully healthy yet. Right. I don't think they're running around a ton just yet, but I know he's been working with Jermichael Carter. One guy that he said that he's been working with, particularly this summer, is Keontez Lewis. Which is not a name.
He was the overlooked portion of that wide receiver haul from a year ago, right?
Yeah, and he was a guy that he played at Wisconsin, started his career at Wisconsin, was productive there. Then I think he had an injury, went to Southern Illinois, and had a really good season, and then transferred to Oklahoma. And he's somebody that I think was dealing with a little bit of a groin issue in the spring, so he missed some time in spring practice. And so now he's catching back up, and it sounds like Mateer has found kind of a pretty good connection with him, as well as Isaiah Satania. So there's a bunch of guys in that receiver room that I think that he feels really good about. And then running back is the other group that I would mention, Eddie, that he said, he was asked a couple times by other reporters about Jaden Odd and how good he can be, how good that backfield can be. That's been a huge storyline. He said, man, Jaden's great. It's going to be awesome. But then he was quick to say, we've got a lot of other guys too. He feels really good about Xavier Robinson, Javonte Barnes, Taylor Tatum. He feels like that running back room has a bunch of guys, not just Jaden Ott.
We certainly, I don't know if you got into it with him, but it's going to be contingent upon, kind of what happens up front, obviously, with the 50 sacks from a year ago on offensive line that has a lot of guys returning. They went out and added some depth as well. It might just come down to what that offensive line is, and certainly going to be able to see that in week 2 when Michigan comes to town.
Yeah, take a shot if you've heard this before, but Troy Everett was mentioned a lot by Mateer, and just kind of being a leader for that group up front, as well as just the offense and team as a whole. He also mentioned Jacob Sexton, Fabechi Wiwu, and then Derek Simmons was somebody that he specifically pointed out. I think somebody had asked him, who's one player at the end of the season that maybe people don't know about right now, but at the end of the year, they're going to be like, man, he's a good player. And he said Derek Simmons. He said he thinks that he's an SEC level starting tackle and somebody that I think he said he's a dog. And so I think that we've talked about him saying, hey, he's probably going to be the starting right tackle. Mm-hmm. And it certainly sounds like he's made a good impression so far.
Despite not even playing in a game, he has helped Oklahoma's efforts from a program circumstance, obviously, helping with some of the guys that came in during the spring, helping the team get ready offensively. But off the field, he played a big role in getting Bo Bentley, and that was something that you wrote about today on Tuesday on Sooner Scoop.
Yeah, he was kind of Bo's host, and I think it was Ben Arbuckle that kind of put him onto Bo in terms of recruiting him, months ago. And I think that there's a lot of similarities there between those two in terms of come from pretty big high schools down in the DFW area. I know Salina's I think they're 4A, and obviously Little Elm, where Mateer comes from, is 6A, but very similar down in Dallas, and as well as their play style. And that's something that Mateer said the coaches really honed in on, is that they feel like he's very similar in terms of his ability to run as well as the arm strength. And just kind of the offense I think they run at Salina as well is something that's kind of similar. So they kind of fit exactly what Ben Arbuckle's looking for in his quarterback. And I think John kind of really took Bo under his wing. I know that he was a big part of his official visit weekend, back on June 8th, stayed in contact with him, during his decision. And, it was funny. He said that, man, I don't envy those coaches at all. Like, I'm so glad I don't have to do this with all these recruits. But he said it was a joy to get to know Bo, and said that he was really battling it out with Garrett Nussmeier at LSU. Obviously, it came down to OU and LSU, and that he's really excited that he thinks that he's going to be very successful at Oklahoma, and maybe they overlap. If John decides to come back, then obviously they'd be together for a year. But if not, he feels like Bo's on the right trajectory.
It's just interesting too, and talking to John Mateer, even when he came back or came in for the first time, and we talked to him during the Spring Bowl, just his road to get to Norman. I think that, if they are able to find success, you're talking about one of the guys that a lot of people will be talking about, even more so than they already are. And I think anybody that logs onto social medias during the summer months knows that John Mateer has been one of the names that it just continues to pop up. It almost seems like he's done a lot at Oklahoma without doing anything.
Yeah, and he told me, I kind of asked about that. I was like, have you seen like all this hype that's going on with you? And he's like, oh yeah, I had to delete my social media. And so he's been on and off on, I think he said he's completely deleted Twitter. At least he does.
Probably smart for now.
Yeah. I know he's on Instagram and still kind of active on there, but he's definitely has seen some of the stuff. And he said, now it's time for him to just go prove it and prove that he can play at this level, play on this stage. And that's what's going to make this season so fascinating, Eddie. It feels like there's so many new pieces at Oklahoma, and John Mateer, Ben Arbuckle, like, can they say kind of not I don't know about save this program, but like, I mean, in a way, maybe save people's jobs,
sure.
Turn this thing around from where it was a year ago, which was a total disaster. And I think that it's kind of one of those unspoken things that John and Arbuckle both kind of know that, and they feel like they have something to prove. And, it's just such an interesting thing because, yes, Mateer's been talked about a ton, but it feels like not a lot of people have actually seen him play.
Sure. Because
Washington State, they had a lot of those late kickoffs. You have
to be a true sicko if you're staying up to watch the Washington State games a year ago.
And they weren't playing the best competition, other than a few Power 5 or Power 4 teams that they played. They weren't always playing the best teams. So it's kind of like, a lot of people think John Mateer is going to be great, but we haven't really seen him play. I've never seen him play. I've gone and watched his highlights, but I can't remember me sitting down last year and watching a Washington State football game.
There might have been a couple of times when, especially like kind of early mid-season, when we were able to get back to a hotel or get back to, get back to the house from after a home game, and you flip it on and you see him talking about all these big numbers that this Ben Arbuckle guy at 28 years old at the time was putting up. But I think that kind of goes hand in hand with the expectations now that he's going to be facing Oklahoma. And we've seen it, I think, over the last, for the most part, probably the last 6-7 years, the last 3-4 quarterbacks that have come through here, Baker and Kyler and Jalen, obviously, they didn't have much of a problem with the expectations, but you did see some growth and some stunted growth maybe in those first couple years, or the first year with Dylan Gabriel, getting comfortable with everything that's asked of you coming in from Central Florida. Those do kind of, they're parallel with what John Mateer is going to go through here over the course of the next 7 months at Oklahoma.
And that's what's going to be really interesting, because I do think it felt like it took Dylan about a year to kind of grow into what it means to be the quarterback at Oklahoma. And then you saw it his last year at OU where he really thrived, and the football team won a lot of games. I think, John, it might happen faster. I sense just a different type of confidence from him, and I think that the success that he had last year with Ben Arbuckle is a big reason for that. Whereas Dylan, had kind of battled some injuries. I don't think he was with Lebby the year before he came to Oklahoma, so he kind of had to get back into it. I think it could happen faster for John, but you're right. It's going to be super intriguing, fascinating to kind of watch how this plays out with him and how quickly he can ingratiate himself towards Oklahoma. Look, if he can go out and beat Michigan in week 2, then who knows what the season could hold. But I do think it's going to be interesting to see the perception of Mateer before the season and what's it like after the season, because it could go great, or maybe this thing goes off the rails. Who knows?
Yeah, and I just lastly, and I promise at some point we're going to stop talking about the Thunder and making comparisons to the basketball side of things with football, but you go back to Sam Presti's press conference on Monday afternoon, and there is a lot of luck that comes into a special season, right? You have to have the luck from the injury standpoint. You have to have luck on the field to win games to get to that point. And then certainly when you get to the playoffs, you have to have a little bit of luck to get through those games, right? But I don't think that maybe luck's not going to play all of the parts in it, but there is some luck in terms of how he got to Norman with Jackson Arnold and the failed experiment there and him deciding to move on and the, I guess stars aligning, if you will, to come together for Ben Arbuckle and John Mateer to come to Norman.
Yeah, I mean, he told me straight up too, down in Louisiana, that he never thought that he would end up at Oklahoma. Like, it was never even a thought that would happen, and that's because of the expectations at OU around Jackson. And I mean, we talked about it on this show. I mean, a year ago, right, we're at the SEC 100%. Welcome party or whatever, and we're talking about, hey, expectation is Jackson Arnold's going to be here a couple years, maybe compete for a Heisman, win a lot of games, and Oklahoma's going to be well off. And that flipped quickly. 4 games into the season, that was a killed narrative,
Sure.
right? So you never know how quickly that's going to happen. And obviously Mateer's, even you look back at his recruitment, I mean, he was going to go to Central Arkansas. That was really his only offer. And then Washington State came in last minute from Eric Morris. He grew into be a really good player. Ben Arbuckle goes to Washington State. He develops in the system. He sits behind Cam Ward, who goes on to Miami, gets an opportunity at Washington State, blows up last year, and now he's at OU, one of the premier programs in the country that's known for quarterback play, with the chance to kind of carry that legacy, get them back to what they were with Baker, Kyler, and Jalen. It's going to be fascinating, Eddie, to watch just how he develops this year. And look, if he has a great year, it's my feeling that he's going to go to the NFL draft. And you've heard some of these draft experts. I know it was Todd McShay that said that this is a guy that could go in the first round next year if he has a really solid season for Oklahoma. So, obviously you want him to come back next year if you're an OU fan. But if he doesn't, that probably means that he had a spectacular season, and so did Oklahoma.
Might be talking about him being in New York City in December. Maybe possibly, be wild talk about John Mateer being a first-round draft pick.
It does feel
in April
crazy,
next year.
It feels crazy, Eddie. Like when he first transferred to OU, you're like, okay, this is a really good get for Oklahoma.
Sure.
Maybe he can be like in the top half of the SEC quarterbacks. Now it's reached a point where people are saying, hey, he might be top 5 in the country. He might be top 3 in the country in terms of quarterback play. It's kind of crazy how this hype train, and it always happens in the offseason,
right?
Because there's nothing else to talk about, but it's really taken off over the last 3-4 months.
Very good. Plenty more to come from your trip down to Thibodaux, Louisiana, in the Manning Passing Academy. How was Eli and Peyton?
They were great. I didn't talk to them a whole lot, but they seemed like they were having a good time. That's a really cool.
John Gruden just walking around being crazy?
Oh, yeah. He was, yelling and stuff, and he just having a good time. But
and by the way, if he has a really good year, I would imagine he's going to be invited to John Gruden's quarterback camp
down
at the end of next year
in Tampa. But it's a really cool event. There's thousands of kids down there, and it's kind of a fun thing. And humid as hell, though. Let me tell you,
I can imagine.
Sweating. So I don't know how those guys were down there for 4 days straight, throwing down there and working out. I could not have done that.
Glad to have you back. Welcome back to Oklahoma.
Thank you.
I know that you said the roads down to Louisiana were very good.
They were terrible. Some of the worst roads I've ever driven on. But shout out Eskridge Lexus getting me a car to go down there.
Absolutely. All right, that's going to do it. Look for all of Georgia's stories. A couple already up on SoonerScoop.com, as well as more to come from Louisiana and the Manning Passing Academy. Kind of getting to know maybe John Mateer a little bit more from a lot of people that have been around him, right?
Yeah.
Here over the last couple years in his ascent into college football stardom, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I mean, look, the way he's talked about right now, it's certainly, I would say, stardom, premier. I mean, that is what he is right now.
No doubt about it. All right, for George, I'm Eddie. We'll see you back here on the SoonerScoop.com